So we can, I think, very good morning to all of you. Your Excellency, Honorable Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, Chancellor of JNU, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Santishree Dhulipudi Pandit, the Dean of the School of International Studies, Professor Amitabh Mattoo, ambassadors, other dignitaries, my dear colleagues, students. It is really a pleasure to have you all here with us this morning as we start with the inaugural session of the Pandit Hriday Nath Kunzru Memorial Lecture Series 2025 on why international relations matter. These lectures are a flagship event of the school. They will continue throughout the week, providing an opportunity for academics to have an interface with policymakers and the wider civil society. This year, we also happen to be celebrating 70 years of the founding of the School of International Studies under the leadership of our Dean, Professor Mattoo. A part of Pandit Hriday Nath Kunzru's legacy was the Indian School of International Studies, which was established in the Indian Council of World Affairs in 1955 for the Indian study of international affairs. The idea really was to create an Indian intellectual tradition in international affairs, and it was eventually merged with the School of International Studies in, I think, as School of International Studies in 1970 with JNU. We are very grateful to our Chancellor, the guest of honor today, Ambassador Sibal, for his constant support and for accepting to deliver the inaugural address to kickstart the lecture series. Ambassador Kanwal Sibal is the former Foreign Secretary of India. He's been the Indian ambassador to Russia, Turkey, Egypt, France. He also served as a member of India's National Security Advisory Board. In 2017, he was conferred with the Padma Shri for his distinguished service in the field of public affairs. He has also been awarded the scientific degree of Grand Doctor of Philosophy and has received the title of Full Professor from the European Academy of Informatization and the World Information Distributed University. We are indeed very indebted to our Vice Chancellor, Professor Pandit, for her encouragement for all our endeavors and, of course, for also being an inspiration to us. Ma'am is the first woman to hold the office of the Vice Chancellor of JNU, and she holds a PhD in International Relations from SIS, a matter of pride for us. She has received a diploma from California State University, postgraduate diploma in Peace and Conflict Studies from Uppsala University, Sweden. She's fluent in several languages, has won several academic awards, both national and international, and we're really very happy to have you here with us, presiding the inaugural session this morning. Our Dean, Professor Amitabh Mattoo, Professor of International Relations and Foreign Policy, has a DPhil from University of Oxford in International Relations. He serves as Honorary Professor at the University of Melbourne, was the founding director, CEO of Australia-India Institute, and deputy chair of the advisory board of the German Institute of Global and Area Studies. He's also a former vice chancellor of the University of Jammu and has received the Padma Shri Award for his contribution to public life in 2009. I would also like to put on record the contribution of the Indian Council of Social Science Research, the Northern Regional Center, to this event. I'll now request Professor Mattoo to welcome our Chancellor with the flowers. And our Vice Chancellor as well. And I request Professor Mattoo now to address us.
Thank you. The Honorable Chancellor of JNU, Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Santishree Pandit, Professor Priti Singh, Brand Custodian of the School and Convenor of the Kunzru Memorial Lectures, Excellencies, esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests, dear students and especially students and scholars, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and a privilege to stand before you today as the Dean of the School of International Studies, especially since you have gathered not only to commemorate the legacy of Hriday Nath Kunzru, but also to celebrate a remarkable milestone, as you just heard, the 70th anniversary of our dear School of International Studies. 70 years ago, Hriday Nath Kunzru was a valiant freedom fighter and a prominent member of the Constituent Assembly, helped to lay the foundation of what would become a beacon of knowledge and scholarship in the field of international relations. As one of the founders of Sapru House, the Indian Council of World Affairs, and the Indian School of International Studies in 1955, he envisioned a space where academic rigor, research, and diplomacy would converge to foster understanding and cooperation in a rapidly changing world. Today, we honor his wisdom and commitment to the ideals of international engagement and scholarly excellence. Over the decades, the School of International Studies has evolved into one of the largest and most influential departments of international relations in the world. With nearly 150 dedicated faculty members spread across 14 specialized centers, we have consistently pushed the boundaries of knowledge, not only contributing to academic discourse, but also engaging with pressing global challenges. Our faculty's expertise spans a diverse array of topics embodying the complexity and dynamism of IR as a field of study. One of the critical contributions of the school has been its vital role in recovering, shaping, and articulating an Indian perspective in international relations. For far too long, dominant narratives from the West have overshadowed the rich intellectual traditions and strategic thinking that have emerged from India. The prevailing notion that Indians have not systematically considered their place in the world or developed coherent frameworks for security and strategy is not only misleading but also dismissive of our historical, political, and cultural heritage. Through our research, teaching, and engagement with these global narratives, the School of International Studies has challenged these misconceptions. We have drawn upon India's wisdom, historical experiences, and contemporary realities to present a nuanced understanding of IR that reflects our unique context. Our scholars have addressed crucial questions of sovereignty, security, development, and diplomacy, highlighting the distinctive Indian approach to these issues. Moreover, our faculty's work has illuminated India's contributions to international law, global governance, multilateralism, and peace building, asserting that we have a rich intellectual tradition that deserves recognition on the world stage. This effort not only enriches the academic landscape, but also empowers future generations of scholars, policymakers, and practitioners to engage from the world from an informed Indian perspective. This year's theme, as you heard, for the Kunzru lectures, which intrigued the Chancellor as well, is on why international relations matters. It invites us to delve deep into the very essence of our discipline by questioning first principles. It's a call to examine the fundamental questions that lie at the heart of international engagement. What does it mean to understand the world through the lens of IR? How do historical, political, economic, and cultural contexts shape our interactions on the global stage? Through various theoretical frameworks and perspectives from different geographies, we will deconstruct these questions, fostering a rich dialogue that illuminates the significance of our field in contemporary society. In an era marked by unprecedented challenges and transformation, be it climate change, geopolitical tensions, the rise of new global powers, or indeed the systematic chaos created by Trump's America, the study of IR has never been more critical. It's our responsibility as scholars and educators to equip ourselves and our students with the tools to navigate this complex landscape. The insights we glean from our explorations can guide policymakers, inform public discourse, and ultimately contribute to a more nuanced understanding of our interconnected world. To paraphrase the US Vice President J.D. Vance, surely if the world has time for a Greta Thunberg or an Elon Musk, it should have the tolerance and bandwidth for a uniquely Indian perspective on global affairs for the next decades to come. As we embark on this year's series of lectures, I encourage each of the students to engage actively with our speakers, to question, to challenge, to reflect. Let us honor Kunzru not mainly through remembrance, but through our commitment to advancing the ideals he championed, dialogue, understanding, and relentless pursuit of knowledge. In closing, let me extend my gratitude to our Honorable Vice-Chancellor and our Chancellor. It's a remarkable confluence that we have brilliant scholars and practitioners as the Vice-Chancellor and the Chancellor, both in the field of international relations. It is through this confluence that I believe we can make SIS great again. Thank you very much. May I now invite the Honorable Vice-Chancellor, Professor Santishree Dhulipudi Pandit, to give her opening remarks.
Good morning to all of you. Respected Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, Professor Amitabh Mattoo, Dean SIS, Professor Priti Singh, Professor S.D. Muni, Professor Aprajita Kashyap, and faculty, students, ambassadors, welcome to JNU, which is India's topmost university, and I congratulate all the Dean and his team of School of International Relations for two things. One, restoring and reviving the Kunzru Memorial Lectures. They're wonderful, and its 70th year of existence. And also I would like to tell you this year, MA International Studies, JNU, has been rated as one of the best courses internationally. So I think even if we are giving ranking for the government of India, in the QS we beat all the fancy top institutes of IIMs and IITs, giving India its best rank at the 20th. And I'm sure SIS will also do the same. It's my school as well, and I'm very happy that we have revived this, and I hope we revive even the other lectures in the name of several of other doyens who have been here in the School of International Relations. Now I'm very happy that the topic for this series is why international relations matter. First is the urgency. In today's world, if you see, international relations is not a luxury, but a necessity. We live in an era where global events, tariff wars, energy crisis, supply chain disruptions, geopolitical conflicts, and today's earthquake all affect us directly with immediate consequences. And that is why international relations matter. The world is more interconnected than ever before, and yet the rising tide of nationalism, protectionism, and regional conflicts is challenging the very fabric of globalization. The impulse of retreat inward to focus exclusively on domestic priorities is neither new nor surprising. We see this today in various forms: economic nationalism in the West, increasing skepticism towards international institutions, and the rise of unilateralism in global politics. Many argue that in such a bleak scenario, investing time, energy, and resources in studying IR is futile, but nothing can be further from the truth. I would rather say a shifting global order and India's place in it. India is no longer a rule taker, it is a rule shaper, if not a rule maker. The global order is undergoing a lot of transformations. The G20, which India hosted, and now Brazil is hosting, has become an important force with Africa and other areas. And India also is geopolitically, geoculturally important because the conflicts in Asia, both in West Asia as well as the Indo-Pacific, are very primary to India's concerns. The question is then, why study international relations? All you young students who come to JNU, a question often posed: if international conflicts persist despite extensive diplomatic efforts, many of you ask this question, and hence I say yes, because it is not, we don't merely document conflicts. It provides the intellectual tools necessary to understand, predict, influence global affairs, as well as I have a challenge to all these young minds: can we build narratives from the South, instead of simply repeating those narratives that are given to us from an Anglo-American dominant IR. India's new diplomacy, a shift from non-alignment to multi-alignment. So this is another area where, what are its features? Strategic autonomy, issue-based alignments, balancing act, and global South leadership. This new diplomacy is pragmatic and future-oriented. It acknowledges that in a multipolar world, India must engage with all major players while protecting its national interests. India's expanding global footprint, economic diplomacy, technological collaborations, climate leadership, security and defense partnerships, humanitarian and development assistance, especially in the COVID. We proved to be the pharmacy of the world. And we also proved that even if we didn't have enough vaccines for ourselves, we were generous enough to give it to poorer nations or our friends in the global South, which was indeed a paradigm shift. Theoretical frameworks in IR matter, and it is here I request students to go beyond realism, liberalism, and constructivism to maybe Indo-centric or South theories. Can we construct them? We can. And what is the future of India's strategic thinking? Do we have a strategic framework? There are many who have written that we don't have one. But then we have proved that we do. Then what are the challenges of warfare, economy, and governance? Cyber security threats challenge traditional security notions of sovereignty. Artificial intelligence and automation are reshaping economic competitiveness. Space diplomacy is emerging as the next frontier. And as most of you know, in our convocation, we had Somnath, who took us into that elite club. Global governance structures are under pressure to reform. So India needs scholars, diplomats, policy makers who can navigate these complexities with a deep understanding of global affairs. The new education policy NEP 2020 recognizes this need by promoting interdisciplinary studies that incorporate international perspectives. I would conclude on the need for thoughtful engagement, global engagement. What is it that scholars will have to look into, especially in Jawaharlal Nehru University? Please remember, many of our professors, including Professor Muni, have also become ambassadors. So many of you not only will join foreign service, but as academicians also can become ambassadors. First, make informed policy decisions. Navigate geopolitical uncertainties. Strengthen India's global influence. Foster economic and technological partnerships. As we commemorate the Pandit Hriday Nath Kunzru Memorial Lectures, let us reaffirm our commitment to understanding and shaping the world through informed strategic and visionary diplomacy and building narratives. The future belongs to those who engage, adapt, and lead, and India is poised to do that. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Much, ma'am, for that brilliant opening address. May I now invite the Chancellor of the University, Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, to deliver the inaugural address. Ambassador Sibal.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dean of the School of International Studies, distinguished members of the audience, especially some ambassadors who have who've taken the time off to come and be part of the proceedings this morning. When I was asked to speak on the subject, why international relations matter, I really didn't know what to say, because international relations do matter. So I can't say they don't matter. Certainly not in the School of International Studies. So I thought I can't then stand here and say to you that they don't matter, which I can't say. So I was very intrigued. So I thought maybe the topic chosen for this commemorative lecture might suggest that the School of International Studies was having a bout of existential angst. It seems to want to convince the doubters that international relations do matter and initiate a wider discussion on the subject. I am, of course, saying this lightly. I don't think this is really the case. My understanding would be that this is to stimulate thinking on the importance of international relations in general, apart from the discussions that will take place on specific regions of the world. When you say, does Europe matter? Of course, you can explain why Europe matters, why Africa matters, or why Latin America matters. Much easier to handle that. There is a need to better understand the dynamics of international relations, to understand how nations relate to each other, the factors at play, and obviously through such understanding contribute to shaping an effective foreign policy in practice. So international relations do matter, which is why the School of International Studies, which is a prestigious part of the JNU, exists in the first place. The school conducts several area studies. We just heard there are 14 of them, and has a large faculty, 150, we just heard, produces so many PhDs, and has a very dynamic dean who is very well versed in international relations in general. The other day at the convocation, the almost unending stream of PhD students getting their degrees was truly impressive. It actually taxed my legs, as I had to stand for a long time to hand over the degrees to them. These students had spent several years in doing research on various aspects of international relations and capped their hard work with a prestigious degree. Their numbers suggest that for them, international relations do matter. They are going to be assets to the country, whatever the careers they follow, whether in academia or the civil service or think tanks dealing with foreign affairs. There are two aspects of international relations. I'm not a scholar of international relations. There is the theoretical part and the practical part. At the theoretical level, there are many theories of international relations, including realism, liberalism, constructivism, Marxism, feminism, critical theory. There is a balance of power theory, dependence theory, prospect theory, systems approach, communications theory, decision-making theory, world systems theory, game theory. All these theories help to explain some facet of international relations based on a reading of history and contemporary developments. These theories help explain how states behave and interact with each other, explain how nations relate to each other, what governs that relationship, the role of power balances in equations between countries, what leads to clashes between powers, the role of international law in governing relations between countries, the nature of international law as such, who makes international law, is there equity in international law, or is it the product of finding a balance between the competing interests of powerful countries? The role of treaties and alliances, conflict resolution theories are all part of the theoretical basis of international relations. And then I asked myself, I've never been a scholar and never dealt with theory of international relations, but I've spent 40 years or more in diplomacy and had several ambassadorial assignments, including heading the Ministry of External Affairs at one stage. But I must confess, I have not felt that practical diplomacy necessarily requires a scholarly understanding of the various theories of international relations. Sorry to disappoint you. It could well be that such understanding materially aids practical diplomacy. But I cannot say this definitively from my own practical experience. There is not enough information available to take a view that diplomats with a scholarly background perform better than those who lack that background. Some professors or scholars who take on diplomatic roles also come with ideological or scholarly biases, and that is not always helpful. Though some with a professional background, like Kissinger, have made their mark in diplomacy. But then Kissinger made a mark because he represented the most powerful nation in the world, and his diplomacy was backed by American power. If Kissinger had represented a minor country somewhere in the world, he would not have made any wave globally, or played on the great power chessboard as he did. Now, many American ambassadors to key countries are political appointees, often with a good financial background, or have other connections with the incumbent US president, but not necessarily any experience in international diplomacy. Because the US is world's foremost power, what they do or say is listened to with care, even if they speak nonsense at times. And of course, they are backed at home with the apparatus of American power. Many countries rely on a professional service cadre. There are diplomats recruited. These are diplomats recruited at a young age. They learn the ropes of diplomacy as they rise in the service and are given more responsibilities, often specialize in certain regions, gain proficiency in foreign languages, and develop a good understanding of how best to use the tools of diplomacy in their various assignments. Some come with PhDs or do an international relations course while in service, both to satisfy their intellectual craving as also to add to their professional competence. I do hope that some who have got their PhDs from GNU will look at a foreign service career. We have many doctors and engineers who have joined the IFS. These disciplines are not relevant to diplomacy, but the fact that they have a professional background means that they enter the service with proven academic and intellectual capacities, and that enables them to adjust to diplomatic responsibilities. Those with an international relations background are that much more qualified to do diplomatic work. They would not, of course, be required to test international relations theories in handling practical matters of day-to-day diplomacy, which requires fieldwork, developing personal contacts, capacity to marshal arguments, to persuade interlocutors of the merits of one's position, ability to charm, develop trust, come across as honest, and be good at entertainment, and so on. The adage that diplomats go abroad to lie for the country is not quite true. Not telling the whole truth is different from lying. Of course, diplomats in the field have to follow instructions from headquarters. And if these instructions are to take a certain line, that line has to be followed, even if the concerned diplomat does not believe in it or judges it to be wrong or misleading. In autocracies, foreign policy does not have the same transparency as, relatively speaking, that of democracies. In the former case, the line given by the headquarters has to be followed to the letter, with no scope for adding or subtracting by the diplomat in the field. In the case of democracies, barring matters of the highest importance where every word has to be carefully crafted and communicated, diplomats have the leeway to embroider, choose their own language, add a personal touch to what they communicate to their interlocutors. The day-to-day functioning of diplomacy requires a lot of firefighting, dealing with issues as they arise, finding common ground with partners, enlarging the basis of a productive and cooperative relationship with them, persuading them to see the advantages to them of what you advocate, caution them against steps that might create bilateral problems, handle adversaries, respond to provocations, and so on. It means preparing agendas, and that's the dreary part of diplomacy for high-level talks, drafting talking points, negotiating joint statements. It means suggesting course of actions based on a good understanding of the thinking, priorities, sentiments, perspectives, historical predispositions of countries where one serves. This would include assessing the personality of one's interlocutors and, at a certain level, foreign leaders themselves. When to be firm, when to yield, when to engage, when not to engage, what to tell the media, and how to mislead the media at that time, and how to develop a narrative. All this is part of practical diplomacy. There is drudgery too, as I mentioned, as diplomats are not always on the high wire. In the conduct of diplomacy, and this is my experience, relying on common sense can be most rewarding. In many ways, common sense is an invaluable tool of diplomacy. Common sense can be helpful in analysis and developing a bargaining position in diplomacy. Now, the Dean talked about how in the JNU, in the School of International Studies, we are focusing on Indian perspectives on international relations. Now, human history is full of wars, conquests, bloodshed, and atrocities. The world has seen genocide, slavery, colonialism, racism, massive destruction. Peace and prosperity has not been the defining feature of human civilization. This is true in the past, when nations as such did not exist, and in more recent times, in the 19th century, with the emergence of national entities. This is true even today. The 20th century has witnessed two devastating world wars, the development of nuclear weapons, national liberation struggles to end colonialism, the proxy conflicts of the Cold War period, the Vietnam War, the wars in Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Sudan, Yemen, and Syria. We've seen the promotion of color revolutions, regime change policies. Currently, conflicts are raging in Ukraine and in West Asia, with the razing down of Gaza and attempted ethnic cleansing there. Beyond wars, the international system remains inequitable. Wealth and prosperity is concentrated in the developed world, while most of the rest of the world remains poor. Although shifts in economic power from the west to the east have taken place in recent decades, with the spectacular rise of China, rising prosperity in the ASEAN region, and now the rise of India. Most of the developing world still has high levels of poverty, lacks good infrastructure, is generally mired in high sovereign debt, and parts of it in Africa are even facing famine. The COVID pandemic exposed the vulnerabilities of the developing countries as it lacked access to vaccines. The UNO was created after the Second World War to prevent the future generations from the scourge of war. The UN Security Council has proved ineffective because of the veto power enjoyed by the permanent members, and they are largely the ones who have initiated conflicts as part of their bid to maintain their global hegemony. The West has sought to spread its values of democracy and human rights, even through the use of military force. Its belief is that if the rest of the world accepts its values, its power will not be challenged, and that will bolster their national security. The UN Security Council needs to be reformed with an expansion of the permanent and non-permanent membership so that it reflects the power realities not of 1945, but contemporary ones. The decline of multilateralism in general has occurred to the point that the UN General Assembly organized a summit of the future in September last year to revitalize multilateralism. But multilateralism remains in crisis. The US under Trump has walked out of the Paris Climate Change Agreement again. Trump has also walked out of the WHO. He has had little regard for the UN, which has been true largely of previous US administrations who have ignored the UN in deciding on its military interventions. Trump has also quit the UN Human Rights Commission. Sustainable development is a core concern of the UN agenda, with 17 defined goals to be achieved by 2030. But only 16% of the targets are on track. The G20 summits in India and Brazil have focused on the attainment of these goals, but success is elusive. Funding is a key issue. With the US turning its back on the Paris Agreement and Trump deciding to develop US production of oil and gas to make it the biggest producer of hydrocarbons means that the core of the climate change issue relating to transfer of technology and finance to the developing countries to help them take needed mitigation and adaptation measures and pursue their energy transition goals cannot be adequately addressed. In this regard, the COP29 in Azerbaijan has proved a failure, and India characterized it as such. The reform of the multilateral banking system to raise enough funds to alleviate the debt problem of the developing countries will also be derailed by the change of government in the US, which is becoming more inward-looking and protectionist. The US and Europe talk of the rule of law or of a rules-based world order, but in their policies violate their own declared principles, exposing them to the charge of double standards by the rest of the world. The West uses sanctions as a tool of foreign policy without the approval of the United Nations. The freezing of the sovereign reserves of another country, confiscation of private property without due process of law, censorship, curbs on free speech, banning peaceful protests, and so on, are contrary to the West's own declared values. Trump is laying claims to Greenland and the Panama Canal, is renaming the Gulf of Mexico, which is a return to 19th century politics. It can encourage and give comfort to countries like China in their territorially expansionist policies. Trump has already threatened BRICS with 100% tariffs if BRICS countries move towards de-dollarization, which is not on the BRICS agenda. BRICS is dead, he has said, rhetorically. The US Secretary of State has declined to attend the G20 foreign ministers meeting in South Africa to protest against his land policies, which is a domestic matter. This weakens the G20 forum and makes it unlikely that Trump himself might not attend the G20 summit in South Africa, which, if that happens, will deliver another serious blow to multilateralism. All this shows how much of a minefield international relations are, how much is the West's effort to retain its dominating role, and how much the rest of the world aspires to have a greater say in global governance. We are entering increasingly into an advanced technology age. The West, which gained global domination with the Industrial Revolution, now seeks to preserve that domination by maintaining the lead in the high technology area, a lead that is now being effectively challenged by China. It is in this state of international relations that India has to pursue its goals to develop, attain greater prosperity levels, have a greater say in the global system, sit at the high table, and be a leading power and become a developed country by 1947, which is why the international relations matter to us and to others. The world is interconnected. Even if the process of globalization has stalled because of the over-concentration of manufacturing and critical raw materials and technology in China, putting at risk supply chains and encouraging their shift to more trustworthy geographies as part of friendshoring, etc., the world remains fundamentally interdependent. India's own economy is closely linked to the outside world. We need to export more and attract more foreign investment. We need to get more access to cutting-edge technologies. We have the largest number of chip designers in the world, but we need to develop our own semiconductor manufacturing sector. In the area of artificial intelligence, we need to develop our own LLMs. During the Biden administration, India and the US initiated the Initiative for Critical and Emerging Technologies. This project of cooperation has been renewed during Modi's recent visit to the United States, but rebranded as US-India Trust. The Index X has also been retained as Indus Innovation. Our relationship with the US is the most important that we have. The US is a difficult and demanding partner with uncertain reliabilities, because a change in its global strategy can lead to changes in its regional policies. Modi's recent visit to the US has succeeded in cushioning us from the vagaries and unpredictability of Trump's foreign policy initiatives. India will come under pressure on defense sales and tariffs, Amongst the Trump's appointees to key positions are many friends of India, and they can provide a cushion against Trump's impulsive behavior. India remains a key element in US policy towards China, and this can give us room for managing our ties with the United States. We need to preserve our ties with Russia, as Russia has been a reliable and trustworthy partner. Our geopolitical interests have long been fairly congruent, and even as Russia has moved closer to China, our bilateral ties with Russia have not been affected. To maintain our strategic autonomy, which increases our value all round as a partner, we need to nurture our ties with Russia. If Trump's efforts to end the conflict in Ukraine move forward, our ties with Russia will no longer be a point of difference with the US. We also need to keep the doors of a dialogue with China open so that our China policy has an independent access to it, even if we continue to strengthen our cooperation within the Quad with the US and others as an anti-China axis of sorts. We have greatly improved our ties with the Gulf countries, which has been the heart of the conservative Islamic world. This has been at the cost of Pakistan's influence in this region. There are major projects like the IMAT and the ITU-2 that have been envisaged, which will take our ties to this region much stronger. Our neighborhood will remain a challenge for a variety of reasons. China's expanding influence in the region is a problem for us. While we have recovered from our earlier reverses in Maldives, the developments in Bangladesh have caused a serious setback to our ties with that country. Nepal will always pose problems to us. I've served there, so I know what the problems are. With ASEAN, our relations are stable. The Indonesian president was the chief guest at our Republic Day this January, which reflects our growing outreach to that important country. Europe is a major partner and a source of significant investment and technologies. It will always remain a major player in international relations. With Japan, we have many equities, and our relationship with Japan has blossomed particularly after Abe came to power. Our outreach to Africa continues. A big achievement was inducting the African Union as a permanent member of the G20. Our presidency of the G20 was a resounding success. It validated our foreign policy of friendship with all. International relations in a world where 193 countries have to relate to each other in some form or the other, whether in the UN or in other multilateral or plurilateral settings, and have to together address cross-cutting issues of climate change, environment, pandemics, etc., means that international relations matter deeply. But what is important is that international relations have to become more democratic. And I'll end with what our dean said, that this Trumpian rhetoric seems to have become infectious. Make SIS great again.
The Chancellor and the Vice Chancellor have kindly agreed to take questions as well on the subject of today's lecture. So we have a couple of roving mics, and how many roving mics do we have? Can we have one for the table? So I'll just identify students to begin with, and then faculty members. Raise your hand so that I can see you, or I'll just then randomly ask you. Yeah, students. There's a hand there, which. Yeah, why don't you stand up? Yeah, stand up, and why don't you come to the aisle?
Identify yourself.
Identify yourself, come to the aisle here so that you can be seen and the cameras can capture. Identify yourself and a short question.
I am Bishwajit Das, PhD second year, Center for West Asia, North Africa Studies. Sir, you say that the IR theory is not very matter when it comes to diplomatic practice. I have a question that as a diplomat, you sometimes handle the international legal issue. So you don't have the theoretical understanding of the internal legal issue and other dimension. How can you handle that kind of critical situation without the theoretical and the legal and solid academic understanding?
Yeah, okay, can we take a few questions? So the first question is, how can diplomats handle technical issues without substantive academic backup? Yeah, the last row.
Hello, sir. I am Akash Nigam. I am doing my master's second year in SIS. My question is, adding to that theories do not matter. I think ambassador or the projects which they do is only a part of international politics, and there is a lot more going on and which needs scholarly perspectives. For example, our Honorable External Affairs Minister, he has done a PhD and he writes very well. Like I have read his books. So what about that? And second question is, do we have a limited ambassador like workforce? Like, do we need to expand that?
Okay. Some girls, the remarkably articulate girls of SIS. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Which one? Where is the mic? Why don't you take the mic to the row there with the girls? Yeah. Go ahead. Okay, now we move to faculty. We'll come back to the girls. So faculty, I'll identify Professor S.D. Muni, Professor Emeritus, former ambassador to Laos, who has worn both the hats.
Thank you, Amitabh. Thanks to Vice Chancellor and the Chancellor for very illuminating lectures. I want to add to the questions of two of my students and want to make an observation, no question. The ISIS had no diplomacy division. When JNU was established, Parthasarathi said, I want to establish a department of diplomacy, diplomatic studies, not diplomacy. And Shishir Gupta was one of the first professors of that center. Later on, he was appointed ambassador, first in Vietnam, then in Portugal. But the interaction between diplomacy and theory has been quite consistent. Diplomats like M.K. Rasgotra, T.N. Kaul, Hamid Ansari, they've all been visiting professors with us. Therefore, I just want to strengthen this question that the engagement of theory and practice has always been there. And I have a feeling that this engagement always enriches diplomacy, and the diplomat's engagement with academics enriches academics.
Okay. One more faculty question and then we can move ahead. Someone from Dr. Moshami Basu. So you can't feel that JNUTA is being excluded.
Thank you. I didn't raise my hand, but still. Well, the persistent complaint is, why is there a divide between academics and the Ministry of External Affairs? We do need both. We need feedback from them. They also need feedback from us. Why is this happening? And this has been going on for, this is the problem with foreign policy making in India. And how are we going to redress that?
So, and ma'am, you also.
Okay. Insofar as legal issues are concerned, we have a legal department in the Ministry of External Affairs, which has people. Diplomats now have to deal with a whole range of issues in which they don't have any expertise of their own. I look at the entire climate change negotiations and this and that. But you have people who've been dealing with this, and you take inputs from think tanks and people who specialize in this area, and those become inputs in formulating your own approaches and policies when you attend these conferences. So it's not as if the Ministry of External Affairs has the burden of dealing with every aspect of India's foreign policy, because today foreign policy has dimensions which were never there before, because the world has become globalized, there are cross-cutting issues, and therefore you have to prepare yourself. Take the WTO issues. Now, we have people in our ministry who do understand these issues, but the real work and the expertise in the Ministry of Commerce. And therefore there has to be good collaboration between the MEA and the Ministry of Commerce, etc., etc. Or for that matter, you take military diplomacy. I mean, the MEA cannot do military diplomacy, but it works in conjunction with the Defense Ministry, and therefore together they approach the problems as they arise. You've seen in the case of our border discussions with China, there is this WM, some mechanism which contains both the Ministry of External Affairs and the Defense Ministry when they negotiate with China. So that's a synergy is there. With regard to EM and his PhD, he's doing a wonderful job. Though I've read his book, but that is more about Ramayana and Mahabharata. So it's not the theory of international relations in that sense. But yes, if you have a PhD in international relations and you are practicing diplomacy, that adds to your capacities to conduct diplomacy. There's no doubt about it. What I was saying was that a large part or most part of practical diplomacy is not based on theory. The challenges are different, the approach is different, the conduct of foreign policy in that framework is very different. You're not there testing the theories of any kind. You're dealing with practical issues as they come now. Of course, I mean, I will not dwell on this further because it's a complicated subject. Yes, we need to expand the Indian Foreign Service. It has been expanded in recent years, and now the intake into the Foreign Service is much, much larger than used to be the case in my time, where it varied between 10 and 15, but not more. 15 was also very rare, generally about 10. In some years only 5, but today there are 30, 40 people who are taken in, and there are some lateral entries into the Foreign Service, but you just can't expand it without any thought or process, because then you're going to dilute the capabilities of the Foreign Service to handle our foreign affairs. The feedback loop between academia and the MEA, certainly it should be improved. There's no doubt about it, because I've spoken to some faculty members who are actually day to day informing themselves about developments in the region. Now we have the policy planning division in the Ministry of External Affairs, but it is very poorly manned. And those 1 or 2 people can't substitute for 14 departments who are looking after regional studies here. Now I leave it to the Vice Chancellor and the Dean of the School of International Studies to try and see what mechanisms can be built to have greater interaction, but certainly there should be. Though I've seen that in the think tank circuits where a lot of retired diplomats participate, I find that there are a lot of people, people who are specializing in area studies in the GNU also take part and give their perspectives, and often they're very, very useful because they have done in-depth study of the issues at hand, and they give you valuable insights. That should be encouraged. Insofar as the interaction between diplomacy and theory, And the fact that some illustrious former members of the Foreign Service have come and spoken here and interacted, that's a very good thing. That's a very good thing. But that is more in terms of informing the theoreticians about what the practical challenges of diplomacy are. Not, to my mind, with a view to getting briefed about the theory of international relations or attending lectures in that regard. Now, of course, I would be very interested to know from you whether in your assignment in Laos, how much of the theory of international relations actually informed your work on the ground. I've read your book, so I don't see that a lot of it is based on personal relations and everything else, and that is where the quality of a diplomat is shown in the field as to his capacity to relate and get the job done and find the arguments to do that, persuade others, think of things that can appeal to the local country on the cultural side or on other sides and promote that. So I don't know, maybe after this conference we can talk about how much theory helped in that. But there it is.
Thank you. One final quick round. We have run out of time, so quickly, because 3 people have identified themselves, and if there are 2 students, then we can just do a rapid quick fire. Professor Salma Baba, Dr. Manish Dabade, and Dr. Shukla. Panditji, you also. So all 3 of you. And ma'am, and we just quickly, and we'll finish it after that.
Thank you, Dean. I just want to use this occasion that we have the Chancellor, the Dean, and the Vice Chancellor here, and to take forward this interaction between the Ministry, MEA, and so I would request the Honorable Chancellor to please use his good offices to reach out to the MEA and establish an annual SIS MEA annual conference and a think table, round table. I think if we can institute it in the 70th year, it would be something which would be a flagship. And this would also address some of the issues which have come up. Why don't we have a greater interface between the policymakers and the academic community and the knowledge base we have here? So I'd really request that we will take it forward.
I think we'll just stop there because Manish has withdrawn his question and
good idea.
Shukla is not keen. May I now request Dr. Aprajita Kashyap here to give a formal vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of the School of International Studies, I am pleased to express a deep appreciation for the Honorable Chancellor, who agreed to deliver the inaugural address. Sir, your address as a practitioner of diplomacy has unveiled ideas that would motivate researchers to explore new dimensions of international relations. The Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Pandit's leadership, support, and generosity have always been the motivating force. I appreciate the zeal and enthusiasm of the Dean SIS in sculpting the Kunzru lectures. We are also indebted to ICSSR Northern Regional Center for the funding, which scaled up the organization and has made it seamless. To all members of the diplomatic corps, I extend my sincere gratitude. The presence of esteemed members from the think tanks, other universities, and the media has added value. We seek your support in disseminating the ideas and ethos behind the Kunzru lectures. The academic heft stems from the presence of all my dear colleagues, all brilliant in the specific arena of international relations that they represent, who will justify over the next 5 days as to why their domain matters. We are indebted to the various branches of the JNU administration and the PR office for the logistical support for this event. The lecture series has resulted from the meticulous planning of a committee of colleagues led by Professor Priti Singh. A group of dedicated student volunteers, they worked very hard to ensure that every detail was executed as we intended. Thank you everyone for your gracious presence and patronage. Thank you.